the confirmed departure of the Chief Executive of News Corporation Australia, Kim Williams, from the giant media company. Many will read the political overtones as having something to do with much of the friction between the government and News Corporation over the coverage, particularly in its tabloids, of the election campaign. Is there a connection? Well, to help us try to unravel some of the issues related with this, Tim Elliott, senior writer for SMH, is on the line from Sydney, from the offices of Fairfax Media. Tim, thanks for joining us. Tell us first, what do you know in terms of detail about what's happened with Kim Williams?
Well, I heard this morning that he'd been removed and replaced with a man called Julian Clark, who used to be the MD of the Herald and Weekly Times in Melbourne. And Julian's a much respected, much loved figure on the floor. He had actually retired, so he's brought out of retirement to do this.
Okay, now Kim Williams' departure comes in a political context. First, you think it is likely, not certain, but likely he was pushed rather than leaving voluntarily?
I have heard that he was pushed, but that's just what I've heard, yes.
Okay, now the political context around this, of course, will be the election campaign. Mr Rudd's statements, particularly on ABC the night before last, suggesting that he believed that News Corporation was perhaps waging a campaign because of its dislike of the national broadband network. Do you see any connection between what's happened with Kim Williams and political coverage, or not?
Well, there could be a connection, but I think it's much more was much more driven by the cultural clash at News. Kim was brought in as a bit of a fresh broom, cultural fresh broom, to change the culture there, the blokey, newsy, old-style culture of News Limited, and he was meant to bring in a more sort of data-driven, research-reliant way to make newspapers. And he really he couldn't apparently break the culture there. It's just, he was sort of banged up against resistance all the way, against senior editors there, in particular Chris Mitchell and Paul Whittaker, Mitchell from the Australian and Whittaker from the Daily Telegraph, who constantly dissed him, constantly went around Williams straight to Rupert Murdoch. So I believe that really that the company really at the top there was dysfunctional. It couldn't work like that.
So might this be seen as, in the end, a win from those editors over Williams in a kind of internal battle?
Yeah, totally. It's a total win for them. They've got rid of him, really, in essence. I think the fact that they've brought back a guy like Julian Clark, who's very much an old-style newspaper man, is a sign that the experiment with Williams is over and never really worked.
Do you think there is any connection with the arrival of the infamous Col Allen and the emergence of the colourful headlines in the last week that have drawn so much comment?
I would assume this has been brewing for a while. So I would assume that Col's return to Australia was all part of the strategy to get rid of Kim. Yeah, because I can't see them approaching Julian Clark this morning and saying, "Hey, do you want to head up News Limited?" So I think the whole thing would have been planned for a while, and yeah, possibly Cole was brought back to hasten Kim's departure.
So how would you read this if you were sitting inside either the Liberal National Party, the Coalition camp, or Labor camp, as to what this might mean for election campaign coverage going forward?
I don't think there'll be any let-up. Do you? I can't see there being any let-up or softening of their coverage at all, especially in the Telegraph. No way. I would imagine that it'll go head first as usual.
News Corporation has had a patchy relationship with the government, not just during this campaign, but very much during the last 12 or 18 months. Its fight with Stephen Conroy and Prime Minister Gillard over their proposed media changes that fell flat. What do you think this means for antagonism on that level going forward?
Well, I mean, they got pretty much what they wanted out of Stephen Conroy. Conroy's bill was pretty universally disparaged, and the News did pretty well out of that, as I understand. I mean, they should have no reason to complain there. But I don't know. Look, I think the relations have never been particularly good between News and especially when Gillard was there. No.
Okay, sounds like the events of today, if they have any impact, will be to sharpen the differences, not soften them. Tim Elliott, we're grateful for your time this morning.
Cheers. Thanks a lot, Tim.